All right. I'm Barry Thurman, and you're in C++ language programming. So hopefully that's where you're supposed to be. This is our textbook, Problem Solving with C++, 9th edition. And we're going to be doing a lot of stuff in the online classroom. So if you're not currently logged into the online classroom, then you should do that now. So when you log in to online classroom, you should see this class listed in your class list. CIS 2013, C++ Language Programming, Section Lecture 502. And when you click on that, that should take you to this course homepage. You'll notice that there's some stuff on the calendar over here. I've got the first day of class. You'll see our first assignment is due 1 week from tonight at 5:45. We will also be having a quiz next week over Chapter 1. In the content section will be some stuff that will be useful as we go through the course. In the general course documents, first thing you should see is the syllabus. So let's open that up and take a look at it. Here's my contact information. The best way to contact me is going to be by email. If there is some kind of emergency, you're not going to make it to class and you want to let me know, you can call this phone number. And if I'm available, I'll answer it. Otherwise, leave me a message. Here is an outline of what we're going to try and cover during the semester. And these dates are when I expect to get to these chapters and these topics. But if we go faster or slower, then those will be adjusted as we go along. I expect everybody to attend class every week. I will take attendance, and you will get an attendance grade. However, at the end of the course, if your attendance grade is lower than your average, so in other words, it would bring down your grade for the course, I'll drop it. I haven't had that happen yet. So basically, it's a good way for you to get 100 points by coming to class every time. And typically, that will improve your overall score. Also, it's just a good idea because people that are attending class tend to learn more than the people that aren't attending class. In any case, you will be expected to complete all the quizzes and turn in all the work. The quizzes will all be in the online classroom, and the exams will also be in the online classroom. We will be taking them here during class, but if you are unable to attend during a quiz or an exam, you can take them from somewhere else as long as you have internet access. All the quizzes and exams are open book, open notes, your own notes. I expect you not to be using someone else's notes or looking at someone else's answers, but you can look at your own book and your own notes, and if you have time to find all the answers, that should give you a pretty good score. There will be a limited time to take each quiz and each exam. So I do also expect you to read the textbook. Probably some of you have not read Chapter 1 yet. So hopefully that won't be a big problem tonight. But it will all go more smoothly if you read the text before we have class. So your grade will be based on your performance on the quizzes, your performance on programming exercises, your exams, and your attendance. Each quiz over a chapter will be worth 10 points, and we will have the quiz in class the day following our completion of that chapter. So I'm expecting to complete Chapter 1 today. We'll have a quiz over Chapter 1 next week. I will typically give a short review before we take the quiz. And there are sample quizzes available. I'll show you those in a few minutes. So if you have questions about the sample quiz, come prepared to ask those at the beginning of class. And we'll try and make sure that any questions you have are answered before we actually take the quiz. The programming exercises will be worth 30 points each. And I expect you to do your own work. If you do get together with someone and work on a programming project, I need you to understand enough about that programming project that your program looks different from your partner's program. So the choice of variable names and the choice of how you complete the assignment should be enough different that it is recognizable to be your work and not something that you've copied from someone else. And that includes code that you might find on the internet somewhere. So if you find code on the internet or some other public source, and I look at your code and I recognize it as being code that came from somewhere else, then I will consider that to be plagiarism, and you're not going to get a good grade for that assignment. So it's okay to look at other solutions, incorporate ideas that you find from those solutions into your code, but copying that code is not a good idea. And if you want to use any functions, libraries, or techniques that we have not covered in class, something we haven't gotten to yet that's in a later chapter, or something that's not in this book, then you need to ask me about it before you use it. We will have 2 major exams. We will have a midterm that will be worth 50 points, and we will have a final exam. Each of those exams will cover everything that we have seen in class up to that point. Again, those will be open book, open notes. So if you're familiar with the material and there's something that you've forgotten, you'll be able to look it up, but I wouldn't count on being able to look up everything. So it's going to be important for you to be familiar with the material so you're not looking up every question. Next week, the roll sheet will have your name printed on it, and you'll just initial next to your name. You'll see a column there that says syllabus agreement. Basically, that means you got a copy of the syllabus. We're doing it electronically. And so what I've done is I've put an open quiz in the quiz section. That's the syllabus agreement quiz. Basically, it has one question on it that says, I have received the syllabus and I agree to abide by it. If you complete that quiz, you'll get 5 bonus points. So if you look at the grade calculation, this is a sample calculation, so if we have more than 10 quizzes or more than 10 programs or less, these actual numbers could vary somewhat. But adding 5 points to your total could affect your grade by a percentage point or so. I expect you to take quizzes on the test date, quizzes and exams. If you miss that class and you want to take that quiz, then you need to contact me before the next time our class meets. And I will try to make that quiz or exam available to you. Again, it will be available online. If you don't contact me by the next class, then you've missed that opportunity, and so you'll get a 0 on that quiz or exam. The rest of the syllabus should be familiar. It should be the same as all the other syllabi you've ever read at OSU, OKC. Any questions about any of that? All right. Second thing in the course, in the document or the content section, is assignments. And the things listed in the under assignments will be instructions on how to do the next assignment due. So the only one that is currently active is assignment 1, and we'll see it later on. These are the instructions on how to perform the assignment. In the Dropbox section, you'll have a place to submit the assignment. And once I open each assignment, it will show up in your calendar and in the Dropbox, and you'll be able to submit that. We'll actually go over that some more later as well. The last thing in the content section are the sample quizzes. There's a sample quiz for each chapter, and it's going to be a good idea for you to look at those before we actually take the quiz. These are sample questions, some of which may actually show up on a quiz or exam, some of which may not. And there may be other questions that will be similar to these, taken from the same question set that you haven't seen. Once we are ready to take the quizzes, you'll be going to the quiz section to take those. The only one you should see right now is the syllabus quiz, syllabus acceptance quiz. And whenever you feel like taking that, go ahead. It just means you agree that you've gotten a copy of the syllabus. In the class list section, you'll see a list of, and I believe you can email them or message them from here if you want to. There's also a discussion section. I've opened a general topic for the discussion section, and if you have a question that you want everybody to be able to see and possibly answer, you can create your own thread in that general topic section. Everybody will be able to see it and comment on it. I will see it, and probably at some point, not necessarily right away. And so that might be a good way to communicate to the class. Generally, there's not going to be a specific time or recommendation to do that, but it's available if you need it. When new stuff shows up, this red dot will appear. So, for example, when I have posted some new item in the news section, so you can either go to the news section or you can just go to the home and you'll see the items listed. Once you've seen an item in the news and you don't want to see it anymore, you can I think there's like a dismiss or something that says, I don't want to see this anymore. Once you have completed your quiz, when we get to the quizzes, it will be automatically graded. That's not necessarily your final grade for that quiz, because I will always go back and check the fill-in-the-blank answers to see if you've written something that was acceptable that the computer just didn't recognize as a correct answer. But once those quizzes and assignments and exams have been graded, your grades will go into the grade section. And I'll try to keep up with that within a couple of weeks of exams, assignments, and so forth. All right, so that's the general mechanics of the class. Anybody have any questions about any of that stuff? Yes.
How many questions are on the
Each of the quizzes has 10 questions. The midterm exam has 50, and the final exam has 100.
And the final comprehensive?
Yeah. All right. Other questions? All right. Now, in just a second. So some of you have asked about the My Programming Lab. I know, is that an extra cost option? Not an extra cost? I don't know. So anyway, it's not required for the course. If you want to use it, it's available. It has some like self-test questions and things that you can use. There are these video notes that will occasionally be referenced in the book. And it has the text of the book that's available just when you're logged in. But it's the previous edition. So it's not going to be exactly like the 9th edition. There's a lot of stuff that is pretty similar. The main thing that they changed in the 9th edition is they've added some stuff about the C++ version 11 changes, and they have changed the way the projects and exercises at the end of each chapter are organized. So they've divided into practice programs and programming projects. But a lot of the stuff really is very similar to what was in the 8th edition. So it might be useful. It's just up to you. All right, at the beginning of chapter 1, there's a lot of general stuff about computer systems that I hope you already know. If not, you should do a little more reading and study that a little more closely. Computers, software, high-level languages, and compilers. Basically, what we need to know about C++ is that it's a high-level language. A compiler is a program that takes your source code, translates it into something that the computer can understand, and creates object code. There's also a linker that can link in routines that connect your code to the operating system. So there's some useful and interesting stuff in that section. I hope you already know it. If not, study it. The next section is about programming and problem solving. And it talks about early computer experiments and early programming experiments, what algorithms are, some information about designing programs, object-oriented programs, and the software lifecycle. Again, I believe that most of you have covered that in an Introduction to Programming course at some point. If not, study that section a little more. So let's go on to the Introduction to C++, which is section 1.3. So we learn where C++ came from. Interesting. I don't know how useful it is, but it may show up on a test. The next thing we're going to do is look at a sample C++ program. So in programming, we have the computer aspects and we have the people aspects. So that's going to run on somebody's system. The person that's running your program is going to be the user. You are the programmer. And you're going to write lines of code that are valid in the C++ programming language that will then be compiled so that someone can run your program. So display 1.8 is a sample C++ program that we're going to enter into a programming tool and compile. So the tool we're going to use in this classroom is Visual Studio 2012. And you should each have Visual Studio 2012 loaded on your computers. If it's the first time it's run this semester, then you're going to have to pick a default environment setting. And since we're doing C++ in here, I'm going to choose the Visual C++ development settings and start Visual Studio. So now would be a good time for everybody to start Visual Studio 2012 on your computer.
Is there going to be a download available for that, or can you use a different?
Usually they have a student license that's available through DreamSpark, I think. As soon as that's available, you should get an email message about it. You can also get the Visual Studio Express version.
Can we use Bloodshed?
You can use any compiler that you want to, as long as it works for you and you can produce the source code and an executable that you can submit for your assignment. So, so every assignment is going to require you to submit source code and executable. And if I have trouble running your executable, I'll still be, well, in any case, I'll be looking at your source code, but I want to make sure that you've compiled it before you send it to me. And that'll be one of the grading criteria, whether you've sent me an executable program. But if you've got a compiler that works for you, an IDE that works for you, that you want to use at home, I don't have any problem with that. So eventually it should finish setting up everything. And you'll come to the home screen or start page of Visual Studio. If you have problems with Visual Studio, I can usually help you with those problems. If you're using some other compiler, I may have more trouble helping you with any problems you run into. But I will tell you exactly how to do it in Visual Studio so that if that's what you're using, you won't have any trouble with it. In here, we're going to be doing plain console programs. We're not going to be using Windows to any major extent. So when we start each project, we're going to start with new project, and you're going to need to choose Visual C++ and the empty project. You're going to want to give your project a name. I'm going to give my project a name that I'm going to use for the semester to keep track of it myself. The default location is not very intuitive, so I usually pick my own location. But if the default works for you, that's fine. I'm going to make a new folder. So once you have a name and a location, you've chosen the empty project, you can click OK. And it will create a solution file and a project file, folders, and so you will now have what's called a solution and a project. The next thing you need to do is create a source file. So right-click on source files in the Solution Explorer. And if you don't see the Solution Explorer, then you can click on View and choose Solution Explorer. But right-click on source files, choose Add New Item. C++ file is going to be the default. And again, you can give it a name. And now we're editing a new file. Now, I like to do some other things. One of the things I like to do is I like to have line numbers, because then it's easier for us to talk about particular lines in class. And they always move them around, so give me a minute to find them. Options, text editor, general, no, all languages, line numbers. All right, now that we're editing code, that's less important, so I'm going to move it over to the side. So to begin with, we're going to use some things without really explaining them too much. Include angle bracket IO stream, right angle bracket, using namespace std. What I'm really saying is I'm including a library called IOStream. We need IOStream because we're going to use input and output streams from it. Using namespace means that things are named in a particular named area for naming things called std. And main is the name of the function that the compiler is going to look for when we compile a program as the starting point for our code. And the curly brace is the body of that function. But for now, you can just pretend that I didn't say all that, and that's just how we're starting our program. Those 4 lines are the start of our program.
I'm sorry, where did you go for the line number?
That is in Tools, Options, Text Editor, All Languages, General, and it should be right here under Display. At the end of our program, we'll have a couple more lines. Return 0 and a right curly brace. And you can just interpret that as that's how we end our program for now. So let's type in a line and actually explain it. Int number of pods P's per pod total P's. This is called a variable declaration. A variable declaration starts with a keyword that tells us what kind of data will go into this variable. In this case, int is for integers, whole numbers, and integers can be either positive or negative. Number underscore of underscore pods is the name of a variable that's going to hold integers. And we can declare a number of variables on the same line by separating them with commas. So in addition to number of pods, we also have P's per pod and total P's. And we end each line with a semicolon. That's the only thing that the compiler looks for to end a line is a semicolon. Otherwise, it will think you're just writing a really, 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 really long line. Variables are just named places in memory. So those are places that we can use to store data. The next line is cout, insertion operator, double quote, press return. After entering a number, cout, enter the number of pods. And cn number of pods. The IDE, the Integrated Development Environment, tries to help you out. So we have this interactive device where it underlines things it doesn't recognize with a squiggly red line. And if you hover over that, it'll tell you what it didn't recognize. So hopefully that will help. These lines are all statements, also known as executable statements. Cout is the output stream, the standard output stream as defined in the IOStream library. And the insertion operator says we're going to take whatever's on the right-hand side here and insert it or push it out to the cout stream. And so you can think of those two less than signs as arrows indicating that this data over here is going to be pushed out into the cout stream. The backslash followed by an N, we're going to talk about in a minute. It's an escape sequence. That means a new line character. Anytime you see things that are bounded on each end with double quotes, those are what's known as a C string. Internally, it's stored as an array of characters ended with a null. We'll talk more about those later as well. This line that starts with CN is getting data from the CN, the standard input stream. The extraction operator you can think of as arrows pointing again in the direction of data movement. We're taking data from the CN stream and we're going to store it in the number of pods variable. Okay, so let's go ahead and type in the rest of the program. And if you start typing and say IntelliSense knows something that you might be trying to type and it shows up in this list that pops up, if you hit the tab, it will complete it for you. So you don't have to type the whole thing every time. That can be useful. Okay, now we have typed in a complete program. All right, it's about 6:35. Let's take a short break. And when we come back from the break, we'll talk about what all that stuff means, and we'll compile our program, and then we'll talk about the assignment. So let's resume in about 5 or 10 minutes.